Hello, I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching Deep Dive on NewsX World. Today we will be taking a closer look at Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's probe into the events of October 7. The outrage it has caused and the potential to change how Israel holds its governments accountable. On the 24th of December this year, the Israeli Knesset passed the preliminary reading of a new bill. On the floor of the Knesset, shouts of shame reverberated across the hall. Opposition lawmakers were seen tearing up drafts of the new bill under discussion, one that seeks to change how Israel conducts governmental inquiries. The visitors' galleries were filled with bereaved families who lost their loved ones on the darkest day in Israel history, October 7, 2023. Amid all this, the Prime Minister's chair sat empty. Netanyahu was addressing a military graduation ceremony while his coalition was passing a bill to establish a national state investigation committee. Take a look at how opposition lawmaker Yair Lapid reacted to this bill.
אתם לא החוקרים. אתם לא החוקרים באסון ה-7 באוקטובר. אתם הנחקרים. זה קרה במשמרת שלכם והוא לא יחמוק מזה. האופוזיציה לא תשתף פעולה עם הפרסה המבישה הזו.
The opposition will not cooperate with the shameful farce. That's what the opposition thinks of Prime Minister Netanyahu's bid to establish a new investigative mechanism. This isn't just about a vote. It's a battle over who gets to write the story of October 7. For decades, Israel had a gold standard for disaster, the 1968 Commissions of Inquiry law. It's simple. The government calls for a probe, but the Supreme Court picks the people. Independent, apolitical, untouchable. That's how Israel handled the failures of the 1973 Yom Kippur War. But this week, that tradition was bypassed. The new bill creates a state national commission. However, the fine print tells a different story. Under this law, politicians pick the panel. If the coalition and opposition can't agree, the Knesset Speaker, a close Netanyahu ally, gets the final say. And the mandate? What the commission is actually allowed to investigate. That is set by the cabinet. In other words, the people being investigated are drawing the map for the investigators. So why the change? Prime Minister Netanyahu says the judicial system is biased. He argues a panel picked by the Supreme Court would be a political hit job. His supporters point to the US 9/11 Commission as a model, a bipartisan political party. But critics see something else, survival. More than 2 years since the Hamas attack, more than 70,000 dead in the ensuing Gaza war. And yet, Netanyahu has taken no formal responsibility for the security lapse. The bill even suggests expanding the probe to look at the 1993 Oslo Accords and the 2005 Gaza withdrawal, a way to dilute the failures of 2023 by blaming the ghosts of the past. Away from the political spin, there is the human cost. The October Council, a group of survivors and families, is leading the charge against the bill. Have a look at what they have to say about this bill.
I survived the October 7 massacre in Kibbutz Nachal Oz with my 4 children and my wife. We've had 17 hours of horrifying experience in the safe room with dozens of terrorists running around us, killing, kidnapping, torturing, humiliating our friends and our community. And all I want to have is the security for my children. I want the answers. I want the repair of all the systems that have failed on that day. And I would like to have the lessons learned. And this could only be achieved by a neutral, pure and unbiased committee that will be assembled according to law, and not such a committee that's designed to throw all the responsibility away from the government and help them keep their positions.
Fortunately, here in Israel, there is no need to create a new kind of commission to examine a national disaster. We have the Commissions of Inquiry Law 5729, 1968. For 57 years now, we know how to execute national commissions of inquiry, a Va'adat Chakira Mamlachtit. I support a Va'adat Chakira Mamlachtit not to see anyone punished, and not because it will bring back my only son. No, I support a Va'adat Chakira Mamlachtit so that nothing like what happened to my son can ever happen to your son or your daughter or your parents.
The bereaved families and survivors of October 7th want a judge, not a politician. They want a witness stand, not a committee room. The bill tries to appease them by adding 4 family inspectors to the panel. But here's the catch. They can watch, but they can't vote. To the families, it's a symbolic seat at the table that's already been set. The numbers, meanwhile, tell the story of a fractured country. The preliminary vote passed 53 to 48. But outside the Knesset, the consensus is different. Polls show 75% of Israelis want an independent state commission. 3 out of 4 people. The opposition has already vowed to boycott the government's probe. They say they won't participate in a shameful farce. This creates a dangerous deadlock. If one half of the country views the investigation as a cover-up, the findings will never bring closure. Instead of healing a trauma, the inquiry might just deepen the scar. Israel is now at a crossroads. On one side, a government claiming it needs a people's commission to avoid judicial bias. On the other, families and critics warning that you cannot bury the truth. The bill still has several readings to go before it becomes a law, but the message is clear. The battle for accountability in Israel isn't over. It's just moving from the battlefield to the court of public opinion. And in this war, there are no easy answers or victories. Join us for a deeper conversation. I request Sasha Machda, who's a political commentator, and he joins us from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Sasha, for making yourself available to NewsX World for this conversation. Let me start with my first question. Do you think this proposed commission about transparency, or is it really a political self-preservation tactic?
I think this is part of a greater battle against the judiciary by the Netanyahu government. This is a continuation of what we've been seeing prior to October 7th, the massive battle taken on against the judiciary with the judicial reform or overhaul, as some people call it, and of course of trying to galvanize the low trust in the judiciary and artificially create this sort of low trust in the judiciary to say that although we've been doing this forever with the State Commission of Inquiry, we cannot trust the judiciary, so we need to find a political committee. And this is part of this battle against it and trying to take advantage of this feeling and create this feeling that there is no trust in the judiciary. So I think this is part of this battle against it, and it is something that is a shame because 75% of Israelis, as you said, they support a state commission of inquiry, and the government is trying to pass a national committee of inquiry for the first time. And this is not the time to try something new. If Israel were to change the way it investigates its failures and events like October 7th, it should be done next time before the next failure. Hopefully we'll never reach that situation, but not in the middle of it when we need to draw the lessons from the massive failure of October 7th.
Sasha, can an inquiry of this sort heal the national trauma if half the country rejects its legitimacy?
The problem is that in theory, as you mentioned before, of course this committee would be set up in agreement with opposition and coalition. But the problem is that the opposition, of course, is not going to collaborate with this new committee. They're not going to collaborate in setting up the panel. So ultimately it's going to be up to Amir Ohana, the Speaker of the Knesset, to decide who forms part of this panel, which of course makes no sense for Israelis, that the people that should be responsible and are in great part accountable for this tragic day of October 7th that they're going to be setting up their own investigators. So I do not believe that this sort of inquiry and this sort of committee could actually heal the traumas of October 7th. This was the darkest day in Israeli history, the largest murder of Jews since the Holocaust, and I believe that it requires consensus and it requires a transparent committee, which in Israel has always been done through a state committee. And I don't think that this has changed, and if it were not to be the case, then October 7th would not really close. The trauma and pain of this day would not reach a circle for the families, and it will be very hard to move on and draw the lessons required, not only morally for the victims to understand why their family members and their loved ones were lost on that day, but also what lessons we can learn and how to avoid this in terms of security, because this can never happen again.
And should Israel really preserve judicial-led probes or redefine oversight after October 7 events?
This is the main challenge undergoing right now. Of course, the way that the country was heading prior to October 7th, it appeared that the judicial overhaul, the judicial reform was going to pass. There was nothing that could have stopped it except for October 7th, of course. And the October 7th massacre put an end to it. Of course, people that had been protesting against each other had to unite, and they did unite, and they fought for the country, and they saved the country, because when no one showed up, it was the Israeli people that put on their army equipment and went down to the south and actually saved this country on their own. But now it appears that we didn't really learn the lessons of that day, and the government has slowly been trying to bring back these judicial reforms, maybe in a slower way. It's called the sausage method, salami method, which is slower changes and ultimately trying to achieve the same goal as prior to October 7th.
And finally, Sasha, how can politicians be held accountable if they are involved in setting up investigations?
Only through total consensus, which of course is not going to happen right now. And that's why it's so important for there to be a transparent committee and for things to be done the way they've always been done. And if we were to change this, it should be after a failure, not in the middle of this failure. And the only way to do this, in my belief and the belief of 75% of Israelis, is through a state commission of inquiry that will investigate everyone's failures, because it's important to take credit for the success as Netanyahu has had after October 7th, but we haven't had him come out and take full accountability and his share of the responsibility for October 7th. So I don't believe that a government selected committee could have this accountability, and I really hope that we're going to see a state commission of inquiry, even though it looks like it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Exactly. Well, anyway, thanks very much, Sasha, for joining me in this discussion. And viewers, with that, it's a wrap on this episode of Deep Dive. But thanks for staying tuned to NewsX World for all major news and updates from around the world.